Yeah. What I'm excited about, I mean, obviously, as I told you, I got my first stock at 14 years old, which was a space stock, essentially. So this is a personal interest to me. What I'm excited about is space is now part of the thematic indexing. You know, I've never particularly loved that there are 11 sectors in the S&P 500. I mean, nobody buys consumer discretionary sectors. No nerd. I mean, a modern nerds like us do, but modern people who like to invest think, I want to invest in cybersecurity. I want to invest in solar. I want to invest in clean energy. I want to invest in space. So it's thematic ETF investing. That's the way people naturally think in their heads. Nobody divides up the world into, you know, consumer discretionary and consumer staples necessarily. So I'm enthusiastic about it because of that. I just like to see more companies involved in it. And once people understand, you know, how important space becomes, you get more educated, you get better at it. The problem is this. The same problem we had with the Bitcoin thing a few years ago, that it's hard to get a pure play that's out there. So the more space that's out there and the more Elon Musk gets involved and the more Virgin Galactic gets involved and, you know, the more Jeff Bezos gets involved, the more I like it. You know, Matt, when I look at ROKT, what I find intriguing about it is that it's really a combination of two sub-indexes. One is about space travel, and the other is about underwater, essentially. It's sort of like New Frontiers, as the name implies. But one thing very interesting about what you guys do, and this is probably Ken's show, is you really, it's not an earnings base. It's really, you scan companies using the sort of an AI system for search terms to be included in the index. And that kind of is determined. Can you just educate us a little bit about how you determine what goes in there? I find that scanning methodology you use very interesting.
Yeah, so Rocket employs a robust, systematic artificial intelligence approach to capture innovation within space industry, both pure plays and suppliers, and that doesn't really require an analyst to cover the industry, which I think is helpful in capturing the broad-based nature of something like space, which is, you know, in a very nascent area. So we don't really consider revenue generation, you know, given that is a backward-looking metric of what has been done. Screening for how firms are describing their material operations, however, may provide a forward-looking view into the future, which I think is an important aspect for a next-generation trend like space. So we will utilize a natural language processing process to scan regulatory filings of firms, their 10Ks, 20Ks, and 40Fs, to understand what they're saying in their material operations as it relates to space. And we'll search for things around space mission assurance, space imaging, space communications, space tourism. We will have satellites in there. And I think the big part is with 5G, next-gen connectivity companies and satellites, we want to make sure that these are the companies that are involved in space and are not really the home entertainment or satellite companies that are just using that service. We want to make sure that they are more than users of the technology that they're innovating. So that's the way we capture this market. We look at their prescriptive statements to understand how these firms are investing and innovating within space to attract the both pure play and suppliers to the ecosystem.
And Andrew, describe how the weightings in UFO and how that operates, just so everybody's clear about the differences.
Yes. So we have a former director of the Space Foundation and a whole team that looks at the universe of space companies. I think not looking at revenues is actually something that's not going to give you really pure play exposure to the actual industry that you want to invest in. And kind of by Matt's logic, that equates to me as investing in something called a health food ETF where the top holdings are McDonald's, Wendy's, and Domino's. If you want to invest in space, you might want the actual companies that are deriving a large percentage of their revenues from space. So for us, that was really important. We could have signed up and licensed a number of indexes out there, but it wasn't until we met the folks at S Network, learned their approach and their focus on actually analyzing the companies and understanding and defining the space industry before we felt comfortable moving forward. So we're very excited to have the license on the first index to be recognized by the Space Foundation as the world's first certified space data product. So for us, revenues was actually something very important because I've seen too many kind of gimmick products out there before where someone tries to capture or capitalize off of a fad, a trend, or a buzzword. But when you actually dig down into the holdings, you're not maybe getting that exposure that you want. So it doesn't necessarily mean that companies are bad, but for someone trying to necessarily invest in the space industry, for us, it was very important to provide an actual fund that's investing in these companies that are deriving a large percentage of their revenues from space.
Yeah, and I
Okay. Guys,
I wouldn't say our fund has a gimmick approach that we're using prescriptive documents that are regulatory filings that have to conform to some form of policies per the SEC. And, there's severe penalties for a company misstating their material operations. And I think it is constructive to utilize some sort of textual-based approach to understand how companies are investing their resources from a capital expenditures perspective. I think it can cover a larger swath than what revenue can do, particularly given that revenue contribution can be somewhat low for some of these sort of more fledgling companies.
Hey, Bob,
Okay.
if I can
Gentlemen,
weigh in,
thank you very much.
Go
ahead,
for a
Tom.
quick second.
Get the last word.
Just in closing, yeah. So it's great early stage to see the gloves coming off, and this is a competitive environment. But I think back to that 14-year-old Bob Pisani when he got his first stock. Think about the next generation coming up. What a great gift to be able to give them shares in UFO or Rocket or Kathy Wood's ETF. Because it's really exciting and it helps people learn how to invest. And finally, in closing, Bob, little birdie told me today's your birthday. So happy birthday from all of us in the ETF business.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Bob.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I think back to that 14-year-old Bob Pisani, and it scares the hell out of me. More than 50 years ago. But he was a great kid. I liked him very much, and he's still there. He hasn't really gone away. Science fiction is still my favorite genre of all movies. I'm a huge science fiction fan. One day we'll do a segment on the history of science fiction movies, but that's not for this show.